Wingardium Leviosa!
Leviosa!
Well, it worked in the movie. Hey guys, it's Kevin again, here with...
Allie!
Yes, she's here. She's visiting me in person, and it's absolutely amazing. But what's not as amazing is the movie that we're about to review, Allie. What are we about to review?
We are reviewing the new Fantastic Beasts.
Yes, Secrets of Dumbledore. So this film takes place a little bit after the events of Crimes of Grindelwald. Basically, Grindelwald is on the loose. He has a evil plan, and it's up to Newt Scamander and his band of misfits, or whatever the fuck you want to call them, to save the day. That's literally the best way to describe this movie. So, I've talked about how I feel about the Fantastic Beasts movies overall. What did you think of this franchise, and what's your connection to Harry Potter as a whole?
I mean, I grew up with Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
I never really read the books growing up, maybe just like bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But I've seen the movies. I loved the first one and the second one when I was little. And then Fantastic Beasts, I literally just watched, like, prior to this trip.
Yeah.
So... yeah, the first one, loved it. Second one, not as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had no idea what to expect about the third.
It's very hard.
Stay hydrated.
It's very hard to talk about this franchise these days, mainly because of the fact of just everything that's gone down, how much has changed since that second one. That second one is not a good movie. You guys know. I liked the first one. I thought it was a pretty solid start, but that second one is really not good at all. It really kind of ruined any sort of interest I had for the franchise. It was so, like, messy and just at points just felt like fan service, and I just wasn't really into anything that they were doing. But then, you know, since then we've had so many scandals go down. Johnny Depp being replaced by Mads Mikkelsen, which, I mean, Mads Mikkelsen's a great actor, but Johnny Depp being, that's a whole other discussion. And then, of course, you have, you know, J.K. Rowling's just endless amount of tweets against, like, trans people and things like that. It's absolutely disgusting, the way all of that has turned out. So
we do not like that.
No, it's very hard to talk about Harry Potter, and it's very hard to get excited for this film. I wasn't excited for this really at all going into it, to be honest with you. I kind of expected it to be the worst, just because of the fact that, like, the second one was, you know, the way it was. I felt like it could only get worse from here. Yeah. So I really did not have too many high expectations for this film at all. Yeah. I really was just kind of expecting another mess of a film. But overall, I have to say, I didn't hate this one. I didn't hate it. Secrets of Dumbledore is definitely a better movie compared to Crimes of Grindelwald. But for me, can I say that it's overall good? No, that's not how I would describe this movie. I think entertaining. I think it's definitely a bit more focused than the previous entry, but as a whole, it really isn't anything that great. But what did you think of this film?
I did think it was entertaining. Like, they had some funny dialogue and some, like, comedic moments and everything.
Yeah.
And, yeah, very entertaining moments, too. And, like, good ideas, but, like, overall, it definitely wasn't as good as the first.
Yeah, definitely not. And I feel like this film, if it was going to try to, like, save the franchise, it doesn't necessarily do the greatest job of doing so, but we're going to get into it right now. So talking about the cast here, I don't really have a ton to say because I've already talked a lot of it about them in the other films, but everyone's still really good here. I know people don't like Eddie Redmayne in this role. I've always found him very charming, very likable, and I think he continues to do that as Newt Scamander here. Is he a great main character? No, he's kind of boring at this point. I feel like any sort of interest when it came to Newt Scamander is kind of just, like... They've kind of just, like, ran out of ideas, I think, when it comes to this character, but I think he still is pretty good here in the role.
Yeah, I actually don't dislike him. I think he's a good lead. Just a little boring at times, but I do think he does well.
Yeah, he's definitely fun to watch, but I gotta say, Dan Fogler, once again, is just so good in this movie.
Yes.
I think I've always said Jacob Kowalski should have been the lead.
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel like he very much fits that part here. Like, I really like what they end up doing with him here. He does have a bit of an arc in this film, and I think that they do some pretty good stuff with him here. He's definitely the character that feels the most consistent out of everyone. They haven't done anything to really, like, ruin him or anything like that. I think overall he's been a pretty consistent character, and I think Fogler is still very good here.
Yeah. I think he was definitely the best, one of the best of this movie.
Yeah.
He is a great lead. Like, he probably would be a more consistent, like, main lead.
Well, I think there's just more you can do with him. Like,
Yeah.
Newt Scamander, his entire, the entire appeal to his character was that he was this fish out of water. He was obsessed with, like, his Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah.
He didn't really know how to fit into, like, New York and things like that. But when you take that away, it's
Still
like...
good, but...
him wanting to be this, like, the leader of this quest, it just doesn't really fit in line with what we knew, so...
Newt kind of gives me more of, like, supporting role.
Definitely. And I didn't really think about that until this film. Like, I always... Like, the first two films, I was like, oh, yeah, Newt Scamander's a good main character, but after this movie, I'm like, you really could have had anyone lead this movie, like... And I think Kowalski would have been definitely the person to step up. Alison Sudol is still good here. We'll get into her character in a little bit, but I think that she still does a pretty good job here. Ezra Miller, you know, all the controversy surrounding them, very hard to talk about. They're still okay in this movie. They do the best with what they're given.
Yeah, they're definitely good in this role, but, like...
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about them.
Yeah, very much so. Given all of the recent news events, not the best to talk about.
No.
However, easily the two best actors in this entire movie. First off, Jude Law as Dumbledore. I said in the second one, I said it again. He was made to play this character. He does such a great job of balancing both Dumbledores we've gotten in, you know, whether it was the Richard Harris Dumbledore, or whether it was the, you know, Michael Gambon, more sort of, you know, aggressive Dumbledore that we've seen in, like, that we see in most of the Harry Potter franchise. He does a really good job, I think, balancing between the both of them. Steering closer, I think, to Gambon's in this one. I think the second one, he was more, like, you know, kind and gentle. This one, he's a little bit more rougher around the edges, and I think he does a really good job as this character. You see how Dumbledore's feeling when it comes to this situation, and I think, you know, despite the fact that I don't think it's that well written at points, I think Law really just does such a great job with what he's given.
Oh yeah, I've always, like, been a fan of him for, like, years, so he always gives his roles his all, and this role was just he probably was one of the best characters of this one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And he just, like, had a lot of passion, which was great.
Yeah, definitely. However, for me, you guys know what I'm gonna say. Stand out of this movie, hands down, Mads fucking Mikkelsen as Grindelwald. Look, we'll talk about Grindelwald as an antagonist a little bit later. But the one thing you can't say when watching this movie is that Mads Mikkelsen just absolutely owns this role. And look, it sucks what happened with Johnny Depp. But I'd be lying if I said that, like, Mikkelsen isn't as good as Depp, because he's so much better in this role. You feel that intensity. You feel that villainous, sinister presence to him. This is a guy you're intimidated by. You know, you can see that he is motivated in that way. And Mikkelsen just does such a great job here. He is generally very creepy to watch at points in this film. You really don't know what Grindelwald is going to do. He adds the sense of unpredictability to the character that I thought worked very well. Just overall, very impressed by him in this film. I really think he should have had this role to begin with. Like I said, sucks what happened with Johnny Depp. I hate that the role was taken away from him. But I feel like after watching this film, I kind of feel like that shouldn't have been his to begin with. It should have been Mads Mikkelsen's all along, because I just think he suits this character a lot better. Whereas Johnny Depp was someone that was, like, intriguing, but just felt off a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Mikkelsen feels a lot more sinister, and it feels like this just suits him better. So I just think he really just killed it in this movie,
he was just
as I expected.
Kind of more, like, genuine in a way.
Yeah, I'm more confident, I think, as well in the role.
That too.
Just in general, I mean, Mikkelsen's one of the best actors working today. I've said it so many times, and he continues to really show that here. I don't really have a ton to say about the cast beyond that. This isn't really a movie in terms of when it comes to acting where there's a lot to say about. So I think we're just going to jump ahead and get to the other stuff. All right, so let's get to the directing here, which that really is something that's very important to talk about, I think, when it comes to this movie. David Yates is directing this film once again, and I feel like he did a pretty good... The thing that he did not do a good job with in the previous Fantastic Beasts films is it felt like there was just a huge lack of focus. The tone was constantly clashing. Didn't really feel like he knew what he wanted the movie to be. This time around, I can definitely say it feels like there was a little bit more of a drive here. It feels like when it came to this film, he wanted to get back to the fun, he wanted to get back to the magic, and I think he does a pretty good job when it comes to that here. This movie's definitely a little bit more interesting to watch at points. It's more of a fun sort of, adventure sort of team up, and I think he does a pretty good job when it comes to that in this film, so I think his directing overall was a lot better this time around.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was really good, honestly, for this one. I mean, he honestly did like a pretty good job. I don't really know him as well, but
he's directed like almost every single Harry Potter movie.
Oh yeah. Sorry, it's been a while since I've watched those movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, he always does like a really good job, and like he just really like gives it his all.
Yeah, he really does. He really does. Overall, I was a fan of his directing, but we're gonna get into the writing here because this is where my issues really do come in when it comes to this film. Because I will be honest in saying, in terms of writing, I really don't have a lot to say about this movie because, believe it or not, despite this film being 2.5 hours, it's a very simplistic plot line. It really isn't anything more than just Dumbledore can't fight Grindelwald on his own because of this blood pact that they made. So he rounds up every single character you could possibly think of, including a few others. Not Katherine Waterston because, J.K. Rowling doesn't want anything to do with her after her speaking out against, rightfully so, speaking out against J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling is gross.
Yeah, which I guess if you do, J.K. Rowling, it's gotten to a point where J.K. Rowling's like, oh, no, that was misinterpreted, to literally like almost blacklisting one of her actors just because they spoke out against her problematic views. But again, I digress. Rounds of every single character he can think of, and they're gonna fight against Grindelwald. Like, there really isn't much more going on besides that, but the movie acts like there's a lot more going on here, and I think that's really my biggest problem when it comes to this movie, is that this should feel like a really big, satisfying team-up. Like, this is the moment where it's like, we've set up all this stuff, we're now all going to fight against, the big bad of the series. And it just doesn't really feel that way because, and I said this too when watching the movie, I felt like the film, this series, just not done a great job when it comes to a lot of these characters and their individual arcs. And I also feel like there was too much that they ruined in Crimes of Grindelwald to where it was very hard to get me back on board. It was very hard to get me interested again, especially when it comes to the character of Queenie. You guys know I liked this character in the first movie, and I liked her for some of the second one, but they started to put her in this weird direction where suddenly she's going dark, she's on Grindelwald's side, and they don't know what the fuck to do with her. Like, most of this movie, she's just kind of, like, in the background. She's not really doing much at all.
She's just kind of there.
Honestly, yeah, they don't really do much with her, aside from having something for Jacob to kind of like stew over. This is his motivation for like getting into this is to save Queenie pretty much, and it just feels like a waste. There's so much they could have done with this character, and I don't really feel like they took the opportunity to do much of anything with her, because it just feels like throughout this movie they don't really know what to do with her most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, I thought the writing was pretty good, but also was very simple, like you said. I agree with that. I echo you there. But yeah, with this character, like, they probably just, like, they literally just gave her, like, a filler role.
Yeah, they didn't do anything interesting with her, which makes that whole twist, like, kind of pointless in the end.
So yeah, this, like, the writing was alright, but it was just very, like, basic.
Yeah, a lot of the other characters here, like Newt really doesn't have much to do. He's kind of just like, he's the one that's going to lead us because he has the Fantastic Beasts, but he doesn't really have the Fantastic Beasts. You know, you have characters like his brother who are just kind of like along for the ride. And then you have new characters that they're trying to bring in as well. Jessica Williams' character, I thought, was kind of intriguing at first. I was interested to see what she was going to do, but there's really nothing to her. She's just kind of like someone extra that's with them, and I just didn't really feel like they did much of anything when it came to her character. So again, I just found the writing here very frustrating because I should care. I should be really excited to see these two go head to head, but I'm just not, because I don't think they've done a good job with establishing the character dynamics here. Even Dumbledore and Grindelwald, I wanted more from in this movie. I think they needed to do a better job. Now, I will say they do a little bit better when it comes to that backstory. They do hint at some things that have been, that people have speculated for a while. They actually, they hinted it here. They basically confirm it in this movie. But I just felt like they needed to do more when it came to those two. Like, I understand they have that blood pact, but I don't know if it's like, more flashbacks or whatever, but it just really felt like there was a lot we were missing from that particular side of things.
They kind of were. It was just like a lot of like random things that they did.
Yeah, now I do like the way this film portrays Dumbledore. They try to portray him as a flawed individual. They kind of show some of the like complexities he has, and I think when the movie's doing that, it does it fairly well. Again, it's just the majority of this movie is focusing, when it's not focusing on this quest, it's focusing on some weird election that Grindelwald is going to be involved in, and I frankly did not care about it at all. And that's the other thing, is that Grindelwald as a villain, how did you feel about Grindelwald in this movie, taking Mads Mikkelsen's excellent performance out of the equation?
I mean, I thought this role was good. I mean, obviously there was some like mistakes, a lot, like with the writing and such, like we discussed, but overall I didn't hate it. But like
I wasn't a fan.
I just thought it wasn't as good as previous movies, and like.
Oh no, I'm talking about the villain Grindelwald.
Oh right.
The character of Grindelwald.
Right. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. It was a very hit or miss for me, because like some moments were good, some moments were just really bad.
Well,
they really like wrote this role very weirdly.
Yeah, I just feel like Grindelwald, when it really boils down to it, despite the connection with Dumbledore, despite the really good performance from Mads Mikkelsen, just isn't an interesting character. He has a goal and he wants to achieve it, and that's kind of it. Like, there just isn't really much to latch onto here. And you think about, and I don't want to compare it to Voldemort, but like, you kind of have to, because it's in the same franchise, and it's like, I want to view this series as they are doing their own thing. That's what I've been saying for the past two movies. Like, they're doing their own thing, and I understand that. The problem is now, I don't think the thing that they're doing is interesting enough for me to justify, oh, they're just doing their own thing. I kind of wish that they pulled more from the lore, because I just feel like right now, there just isn't a lot to Grindelwald that is that intriguing to me. I don't think he's that interesting of a character. I don't really latch onto him as a villain. So again, that's something else that just didn't really work for me. And my God, don't get me started on Credence. Such a pointless character.
That was so strange.
Every time Credence enters the screen in both movies, he is just... I'm on the verge of sleep. Honestly, this character is so boring to watch, and I've heard other people say it, and I'll agree. The biggest reason for that is because they did not do a good job with really establishing Credence's purpose to the story. They keep hinting at the fact that he has this larger purpose in the story, and I just never really feel like that's the case. I never really feel like Credence is this pivotal character. The film acts like he is, but they don't really do much with him. So again, there's a lot of characters in this movie that the film should do a lot with. They just don't, and that's what makes this film not very interesting to watch for me. I think that the quests they go on at points is quite fun. There definitely were some moments that I enjoyed in this film. I enjoyed seeing the interactions between these characters, but writing as a whole just wasn't really clicking for me in the way that it needed to, and I think that's what ultimately lost me when it came to this film.
Yeah, this one was just like a very hit or miss. Like it had some good ideas and
Yeah.
like some very interesting and intriguing moments, but like other than that, it just wasn't that good.
And the thing that sucks is I think the setup was actually fairly solid. Like the first like I want to say 30-ish minutes, maybe even an hour. Like I was kind of on board. I was like, okay, this is how you.
I was actually very entertained by the first little bit.
Yeah, this is how you pull me back in. Like we're seeing all these characters interact. They're gonna go on this missions. You know, we're gonna get some really interesting individual storylines with them. Hopefully, you know, maybe add some stakes to the mission itself, and they just don't really do that. I just feel like in general they needed to do a lot more, not in this film but the previous movies, to really get me on board with what they're going for here, because
mostly the second one.
Yeah, right now I just don't really care that much, and I feel like if they even have just there are moments in this film that should feel like a big deal, and it should feel like, wow, this is really kind of changing the way we look at this franchise overall. But because of the fact that they have not done a good job when it came to, you know, the character development and just really giving us an interesting story, it all just feels kind of inconsequential in the end. So that's why I'm just kind of like, I don't really know what the point of this is. There's one thing they do especially where I'm just like, why did we go in this direction? Like, it just felt very desperate in that way.
Yes.
So there's just a lot of things where I just think they needed to do a much better job, again, in those previous movies, so that way this one could just be a lot more interesting and have a lot more going for it. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
They thought they were doing something, but they didn't.
They were not at all. They were not. If they have any interest in continuing, which I don't think is going to happen. This movie is severely underperforming box office wise, getting eaten alive by Sonic right now, which as it should, to be honest.
True.
I just don't see a world in which they're going to be able to make this interesting, because right now it's just kind of lost me in terms of the writing.
Yeah.
So I do want to get into the cinematography here as well as the visuals. Look, everyone's talked about, you know, like the ridiculous grayscale and things like that. And yeah, I think some of it's kind of unnecessary, but there are some really good action set pieces in this movie, particularly in the third act. There's one battle especially that I thought was really cool, the way that was done. This film really is trying to get back to, like, the fun, like, fantasy elements of the Harry Potter films, and I think it does overall do that pretty well. That is definitely something I will give this movie, is I think as a whole, the fantasy elements still do work quite well here, and I appreciate the fact that they went for, you know, they tried to focus a bit more on that in this one rather than a bunch of pointless backstories. The problem is those fantastic beasts that you normally see are nowhere to be found in this movie, and I don't think that's definitely something that I think was kind of missing in this film. I did enjoy the Quillen, though. This creature we're following. I thought the design to the Quillen and things like that was pretty cool. There's a really good opening sequence and things like that. So I do think there is a lot to like in terms of visuals to this movie. I think in terms of cinematography, this is definitely a much more visually interesting film than the second one.
I actually really enjoyed the cinematography and the visuals. It was just really like stunning and really cool, very pretty.
Yeah, for sure.
It was just really nice, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. The score is still all right here. Not really anything that
it's
great.
All right.
Let's talk about the editing for this movie. This film is 2.5 hours long, and there really is no reason for it to be. There's a lot of scenes that just kind of drag on here of characters just kind of talking about whatever. And I just found the editing to be, after a while, kind of listless. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't think the pacing was that great to this movie. It always feels like we're getting to, like, the climax, and we never do. And then eventually when we do, it just feels like, oh, we're finally here. And then the movie just kind of ends. And I just felt like they could have done a better job when it came to the pacing in this film. Like I said, I think the first, 25 to, 40 minutes honestly did kind of have me for a bit. Because I thought that they were doing a better job when it came to setting up the story. It's far less messy this time around. I'll definitely give it that. I just felt pacing-wise, it just didn't really work for me overall.
Yeah, I echo you there. I wish
Yeah.
they could have honestly made this film just maybe 2 hours at most. Like,
Yeah.
2.5 is a little too much because it
Yeah.
just dragged on.
Yeah, and it's not an interesting enough story to
No.
justify that length. I think I always say this when it comes to runtime. It's not about how long the movie is, it's what you do with that runtime.
Yeah.
This
Because
film
some is just filler.
This film doesn't know what to do with its runtime. There are some really good scenes. There's a scene in a there's this scene in like a banquet of sorts, and it's fantastic. Like, I thought that scene was very tense, the way all of that was done. I enjoyed the climax for the most part, although I did feel a little bit underwhelmed by some aspects of how it ended. But again, I just think as a whole, the movie just needed to be cut down significantly. Honestly, I just don't really, like I said, I don't have a ton to say when it comes to this franchise. I feel like there are some ideas that they have that can kind of work. When it comes to, you know, Dumbledore and Grindelwald, that whole thing I think is interesting. I think there are some interesting characters in there. I still really enjoy the character of Kowalski. I even enjoyed Newt's brother in this one. I thought he had some fun lines as well. Like, I thought he was definitely a fun character to watch. But as a whole, I just feel like any sort of interest, any sort of, you know, any sort of ideas that this franchise once had, just don't really interest me anymore, because they just have not done a good job, you know, really building up to this in those previous entries. And by the looks of it, I do kind of see this being the last one. And with the way it ends, I don't think it would be a bad idea to end it here, because I think that they did enough to where they can just kind of wrap it up here. I don't really see how you continue this in 2 more movies, to be honest with you. 1 more movie I could see, but 2 more...
Are they actually making more?
The plan is they're supposed to do 5, yeah.
What are they gonna do?
Exactly. I don't know. I don't know what the hell they're gonna do. But they did announce this as, this is gonna be a 5-part series. But now I guess they're saying that, we're only gonna do it if this one's successful. Which, I hate to break it to you, it's not successful. So I guess this is the last one.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I think
it's gonna be a whole bunch of filler shit.
I don't think they're going to make it. I don't think they're going to make it, because I think this one underperformed too much to where I don't think it's going to happen. But
True.
Look, overall, like I said, I don't really have much to say. I think that there's some fine performances. I think there are some moments that definitely do work. But ultimately, this is just a film I needed to do a lot more. There are too many questionable decisions that happened in the previous films that this film really just wasn't able to justify. I wasn't able to fully get behind it. And a lot of those decisions that went down, I'm just kind of scratching my head as to what was the point of it. The way they resolved them in this movie, especially, I was just kind of like, why do we go in this direction? There's just a lot of things I wanted a lot more from, so I really was not that big of a fan. For a while, I kind of was on board with this, but when it really did come down to it, by the end, I found this to be, honestly, a very disposable sequel that I'll probably forget the second we're done with this review. So I'm going to give Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore a C.
I am giving it a C+. I give it a little higher, but it's still not great at all. It was some good ideas and performances. Other than that, it's not that great.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely better than the last one, but really not
better
anything.
Than the second one, at least.
Yeah, for sure, but really nothing that great. Other than that, guys, for our review of Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, let us know what you guys saw this Morale, if your thoughts, and we'll see you guys. We do have one more individual review coming, so definitely look forward to that one. But we will see you guys in our next video, and we will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
Bye!